got NVAHA, right?
Yes.
And in 1994, we cut our teeth on something called the Homeless Intervention Program to prevent homelessness before it begins. And it kept something like 5,000 persons a year from having to go out on the streets and into shelters. It kept them in their own homes. Highly successful. Michelle is keeping the advocacy flame for affordable housing alive and well. And she understands that when we allow families to fall through the cracks, that this results in a breakdown of families in Virginia. So she's going to discuss housing first and how to motivate the legislators to support and make housing more affordable. And you've already heard about what Senator Favorla has said about using TANF to help support housing for welfare families.
Yeah, not TANF, I just wanted to move them to the top of the list.
To move them to the top of the list. Well, that's helping TANF, so thank you.
Helping the recipients.
Helping the recipients.
Yeah,
Recipients,
yeah,
yeah.
not using the dollars, TANF dollars.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Michelle Krocker. I am the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance. I see many housing advocates and friendly faces in the room today. So I believe this is the first time that housing has had a little bit of a detailed segment at the SALT conference. So we're really pleased to be here, because we know that all the things we've discussed this morning, helping families with childcare, with job assistance, lifting them out of poverty, all these things are really predicated on one basic thing, that these families have safe, decent, affordable housing. It is really difficult to lift people out of poverty and give them the assistance that they need if they don't have a stable, safe, affordable home to go home to at night. So, and one of the things in our work at the local level, we work in Northern Virginia regionally, is we know that coalitions and partnerships with organizations that provide human services are really critical when we ask for support for housing. It's not just housing, it's the services as well. So I'm really pleased to be a part of this discussion this morning that really looks at the totality of needs. And we know that when families have safe, affordable housing, that a child's educational outcomes in school improve, if they don't have to worry about living in an overcrowded situation, if they are not in a shelter, if they are in a safe environment, they can focus and concentrate and learn. We know family stability improves when families have safe, secure housing. We know that our neighborhoods thrive, and our workforce, many of whom are low and moderate income workers that we really depend on for the economy in our region, our workforce has a place to live in our community. So if you work in our community, it would be great if you could live in our community. So John asked me to be very focused today and talk about state level and state level advocacy, and I really love the exercise that Delegate Lopez gave us, and I hope that I will maybe incorporate some of those principles as I'm talking to you, be respectful of your time, get right to the point, and let you know what I'm here for. So I wanted to give you a few statistics about how great the need is for housing for low and moderate income families, as if you didn't already know. But in 2013, the Urban Institute and the Council of Governments did a pretty comprehensive study of the Washington, D.C. region, and they looked at housing need, and they broke it down by jurisdiction. So I went to that study, and I looked at, I pulled some aggregate numbers, and I looked at Arlington, the City of Alexandria, Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, and the City of Fairfax. I think I got everyone. There are approximately 100,000 households that earn less than $55,000 a year. And we know there's a large percentage of that group that even makes less than that. So we've got a vast population in Northern Virginia that really is getting by on very little income. Of that number, 62,000 households pay more than 50% of their income to rent, to housing. Now, if you haven't looked at a rent for a 2-bedroom apartment lately, it's running anywhere from $1,500 to $2,100 a month in our Northern Virginia area. We heard, I think, Senator Favola tell us that childcare is running about 25% of your take-home pay. So right there, if you're paying rent and childcare, what's left for food, what's left for transportation, for any medical expenses. We've seen an uptick in people coming to food banks, and this is one of the reasons why, because of these really high costs that we're trying to address here. So the response to housing comes at 3 levels: the federal level, the state level, and the local level. And mostly this is a local issue. It revolves around land use, it revolves around density, it revolves around developing units, it revolves around taking older apartment buildings and preserving them and keeping them affordable. Financial supports that happen at the local level, where local governments create rental subsidy programs or housing trust funds to support the development of housing. We know that at the federal level, the participation is declining. We spoke about the housing choice vouchers. It used to be called the Section 8 vouchers. For the last couple of years, those vouchers were not keeping up with the demand. So we know, I think the national statistic is for every 10 families that could use a voucher, only either 4 or 6 families are getting them. So there's a great many families out there who are struggling and not getting the supports that they need. Luckily, last year, the Congress voted to fund the Housing Choice Voucher Program at the level that they needed to maintain the existing voucher commitment. We still know that there's a shortfall, but it's better than before when the voucher commitment was reduced. There's also another exciting opportunity, perhaps, we'll see if it happens, low-income housing tax credits, which are the main source of equity for building affordable housing in this country. For the first time in a long time, there's a proposal in Congress to increase the amount of tax credits that states get to support and build affordable housing. And then one other really important program that we saw come to fruition after much work is the National Housing Trust Fund, that is really dedicated to serving households who make from 0 to 30% of area median income, very low amounts of money. That was finally funded, and the state of Virginia did get $3 million this year, and the hope is that that amount will go up, but I see people shaking their heads. That's not a lot of money, right? So what I want to talk about, that's right, it's not much even for one jurisdiction. So what I want to talk about is state resources, and thanks to the work of Delegate Lopez, who has persevered, as Father Creedon talked about, who has been persistent, and who has been focused in his efforts, we now have a state housing trust fund after many years. So shout out and thank you. Thank you for that. Now, it's one thing to get a housing trust fund. Now you have to capitalize it. You have to put money into it, right?
We've got some.
8 million for the whole state ain't a lot.
In 2012 or whenever, when we had the big mortgage meltdown and there were settlements with 5 major banks in the United States and big monetary payout settlements happened, the state of Virginia got their share of the settlement, and a portion of that settlement went to capitalizing the Housing Trust Fund. I will tell you that originally, all of that money was going to go to fill a budget shortfall. None of it was going to go to the Housing Trust Fund, even though that was money that had come as the result of mortgage meltdowns and housing-related issues. So a few advocates, some of them in this room,
Yes,
yelled and screamed,
came to us.
said this is not right. Yes, and Senator Favolva certainly, with her work in Arlington and also continuing in the General Assembly, has been a true housing advocate. But we said this is not right. This money needs to go into this fund that we just now have. So we did get $7 million. And I think $1 million was added to work on the issue of homelessness. So and I have a chart here that's actually sitting outside if you're interested. In fiscal years 2013 and 14, the state put out an RFP because these are competitive funds. There are criteria that are developed that look at the needs for housing in the state. 29 million worth of projects applied for $8 million worth of funding. So that begins to show you that we're short right there. 3 projects in Northern Virginia got funding. So this is one of those important things to know as we go and talk to our legislators about what happens in your district. So in 2013 and 14, we had 3 projects actually funded that worked on permanent supportive housing and housing for people with special needs. It was a total of $922,000 that we got. The next round of funding, which happened in 2015 and 16, was a total of $7 million in that round. Governor McAuliffe proposed more, but it was cut back, and I'll go back to that. Remember that money was cut back. So in 2015 and 16, we had 4 projects in Northern Virginia, Arlington, Fairfax County, and 3 in Fairfax County. 1 working with seniors, Shelley Murphy here with Wesley Housing, and their excellent project at Lewinsville received funding. The other 3 permanent supportive housing and 1 for APA in Arlington. We got $2.5 million in Northern Virginia. So this money counts. It helps to begin to address the needs, all the various needs that we have for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, for victims of domestic abuse, for TANF families, for people coming out of homelessness. Local governments cannot fund all of this. We need all 3 levels of government engaged in creating housing for this. So, what's going to happen this year to our State Housing Trust Fund? How is it going to be funded? Last year it was funded through a general appropriation. What do we know about this year? We know that the governor announced a week or so